Okay, so you're here because you want to know what's really going on, right? Not just skim the surface, but like really understand how this whole AI thing is changing the game, especially in education.
Right, because things are moving so fast.
Exactly. We barely have time to catch our breath, let alone keep up with every headline. So that's what we're diving into today, a really interesting report from Anthropic called the Education Report.
Yeah, it just came out April 8th, 2025. And what makes this report so cool is it goes way beyond just asking students, hey, what do you think about AI?
Like those surveys everyone's doing?
Exactly, those hypothetical what ifs. This is real data. It's based on 1 million anonymized conversations from students using Claude.ai.
Wow, 1 million. That's a huge data set.
Yeah, it gives us a much more concrete and data-driven look at how AI is actually being used in university studies right now. Not just what people say they're doing, but what they're actually doing.
That's what we want, the real story. So we're going to dig into the most important takeaways from this report for you, especially if you're sort of, a beginner or intermediate level when it comes to AI and machine learning.
Right. You want to make sure everyone can follow along and really grasp the key findings.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. One of the first things that really jumped out at me was who's leading the charge in using these AI tools.
Yeah, the data shows a pretty clear picture. There's a significant overrepresentation of STEM students in these Claude conversations.
STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, math.
Right. And if we drill down even further, computer science majors really stand out. They made up almost 37% of the conversations analyzed in the report.
Wow, 37%.
Yeah, it's pretty striking when you consider that computer science majors only represent about 5.4% of all the bachelor's degrees awarded in the U.S. So that kind of makes you wonder, what's going on there? Well, what does this tell us about who's really at the forefront of integrating AI into their studies?
That's a big difference. And it makes you think, right? Like, are certain fields just more naturally drawn to AI? Or is it more about awareness?
Yeah, good point. Because the report also highlights that fields like business, health, and humanities, those are showing lower usage of Claude compared to how many students are actually enrolled in those programs.
So why is that? Is it just that people in those fields aren't as aware of what AI can do?
It's probably a mix of things. The report mentions that, Claude's really good at certain tasks like computer coding. So that might explain why it's so popular with computer science students. But it also suggests that this is sort of a classic early adopter trend.
Like those people who always have to have the latest gadget.
Exactly. STEM fields, especially computer science, they often tend to be early adopters of new technologies.
Which makes sense. They're kind of on the cutting edge anyway. But it does raise some interesting questions, right? Like if some fields are embracing AI much faster than others, could that create even bigger gaps in the long run?
Absolutely. It's something to keep an eye on, for sure.
Okay, so we've got a sense of who's using AI. Now, the big question is, how are they actually using it? What are they doing with these tools?
Yeah, the report digs into that, and it outlines 4 distinct ways that students are interacting with AI. And the interesting thing is they found these different patterns happening at roughly the same rates.
So it's not like one way of using AI is dominating.
Right. They each represent somewhere between 23 to 29% of the conversations they analyzed.
Yeah.
So pretty evenly spread.
Okay, so what are these 4 patterns?
They call them direct problem solving, direct output creation, collaborative problem solving, and collaborative output creation.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. But it actually makes sense when you break it down. They're basically using 2 categories to define these patterns.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the first category is the mode of interaction.
Yeah.
And that can be either direct or collaborative. Direct is pretty self-explanatory. The student is basically looking for a quick answer or solution, like asking a search engine a question.
Right. What's capital of France? Boom. Yeah. Paris.
Yeah. Exactly. But then you have collaborative, which is more like having a back and forth conversation with the AI.
Like a chatbot kind of thing.
Right. More interactive.
Got it. So that's mode of interaction. What's the second category?
The second one is the desired outcome. And that's either problem solving or output creation.
Okay, so problem solving, I'm guessing that's when the student needs help understanding something or finding a solution to a specific problem.
You got it. They're looking for explanations or step-by-step guidance. And then output creation is when they want the AI to actually generate something for them.
Like write an essay or create a presentation.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's put it all together. Can we go through each of those 4 patterns and give some examples?
Sure. So let's start with direct problem solving. That would be like a student asking Claude to debug a specific line of code they're having trouble with.
Or maybe they're stuck on a math problem. They ask Claude to explain a concept or show them how to solve it.
Exactly. They just need that quick, direct help to get unstuck.
Yeah.
Then you have direct output creation. This could be a student asking Claude to write an introductory paragraph for an essay or summarize a research paper.
So basically, they're using the AI to do some of the heavy lifting for them.
Right. And then we move into the collaborative interaction. So collaborative problem solving. That's where things get really interesting. This could be a student working through a complex physics problem with Claude.
So they're not just getting the answer. They're actually working through it step by step with the AI's help.
Right. They might ask for hints or explanations along the way, or maybe they want to explore different approaches to solving the problem. It's a much more interactive process. And then finally, you have collaborative output creation. This is like co-creating content with the AI.
So they're both contributing to the final product.
Exactly. The student might be working on a presentation, and they use Claude to brainstorm ideas, refine the outline, or even generate specific sections of the presentation. And then they go back and edit and revise it.
That's pretty cool. It's like having a writing partner.
Right. And the report even mentions specific examples that their analysis tool Clio surfaced, like students using Claude to create comprehensive chemistry educational resources. So it's not just about writing essays or solving problems.
It's about creating all sorts of things.
Exactly.
That's what's so fascinating about AI, right? It opens up so many more possibilities for how we learn and interact with information.
Absolutely. It's not just about passively absorbing knowledge anymore. It's about actively creating and exploring.
Which leads us to another really interesting finding from the report. This one has to do with something called Bloom's taxonomy.
Ah, yes, Bloom's taxonomy, a classic in the world of education.
I have to admit I'm a little rusty on that one. Could you give us a quick refresher?
Sure. So Bloom's taxonomy is basically a framework that educators use to classify different levels of cognitive processes. It goes from basic things like remembering information to more advanced skills like creating new knowledge.
So it's a hierarchy of thinking skills.
Exactly. The original taxonomy had categories like remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating.
Okay, I vaguely remember that from my teaching days.
Right. Well, for this study, Anthropic adapted a revised version of Bloom's taxonomy to analyze what kinds of cognitive functions Claude was demonstrating in its conversations with students.
So they were basically trying to see how smart Claude was being in these interactions.
In a way, yes. They wanted to see what level of thinking the AI was engaging in. And the results were really interesting. It wasn't what you might initially expect.
What do you mean?
Well, they found this thing they called an inverted pattern. Instead of Claude mainly doing those lower order cognitive tasks like remembering or understanding, it was mostly involved in the higher order functions, specifically creating and analyzing.
Wow. So it was doing more of the heavy lifting mentally than the students?
It seems that way.
Yeah.
Creating made up almost 40% of the observed cognitive processes, and analyzing was just over 30%.
And the lower order tasks?
Those were much less frequent. Applying was around 10%. Understanding is also about 10%. And remembering was only 1.8%.
So Claude was spending most of its time helping students create and analyze information, not just memorize facts or grasp basic concepts.
Right. And while that might sound like a good thing at first, it also raises some concerns.
Like, are we getting too reliant on AI to do our thinking for us?
That's the question the report raises. The authors specifically mentioned the potential for students to be offloading critical cognitive tasks to AI.
Right. If the AI is always there to do the higher level thinking, what happens to our own ability to develop those skills?
Exactly. It's like that analogy they used in the report, the inverted pyramid. If AI is always handling the top of the pyramid, what's supporting the base? Are we missing those essential building blocks of learning?
That's a great analogy. And it's a bit concerning, right? Like, yeah, it's cool that AI can help us with those complex tasks, but what if we're skipping over those crucial steps of understanding and applying knowledge? It's like using a calculator before you even understand basic math.
Exactly. That's the worry. Are we potentially hindering our own cognitive development by relying too heavily on AI?
It's a tough question. And the report also found that this whole thing with cognitive functions varied depending on how students were interacting with Claude.
Right. So when students were using it for output creation, Claude was more likely to be exhibiting those creating functions.
Makes sense. If you're asking it to write an essay, it's doing the creating.
Right. And then when students were using it for problem solving, Claude was more likely to be doing analyzing.
So it's adapting its cognitive approach based on what the student needs.
Exactly. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Now, the study also looked at how AI usage differed across different subjects, right?
Yeah, they found some really interesting variations there. For example, students in natural sciences and mathematics, they tended to use Claude more for problem solving.
Which makes sense, right? Those fields are all about solving specific problems.
Right. They might be working on probability questions or homework assignments that require that kind of problem-solving approach.
What about other fields? Any trends there?
Yeah, they found that computer science, engineering, and natural sciences and mathematics all showed a preference for collaborative conversations with Claude.
So they were really engaging with the AI in a back-and-forth way.
Exactly. More interactive. Whereas humanities, business, and health, those fields had a more even split between collaborative and direct interactions.
Interesting. So it seems like different fields have different approaches to how they use AI.
Absolutely. And maybe the most interesting finding was that education, the field of education itself, showed the strongest preference for output creation.
Really? So educators are using AI to create things?
It seems so. Almost 3/4 of the conversations in that field fell into the output creation category. The report suggests that this could be because educators are using Claude to generate teaching materials, lesson plans, that kind of thing.
That's really cool. So AI isn't just impacting students, it's also changing how teachers teach.
Right. And it shows the potential for AI to really transform the whole education landscape, both for students and educators. Though the authors did point out that their filtering methods for categorizing conversations might have impacted the high percentage for education.
So it's something to investigate further, but it's still a really interesting finding.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about who's using AI, how they're using it, the cognitive tasks involved, and how usage differs across subjects. So for our listeners out there who are, interested in AI and machine learning, what does all of this really mean for the future of education?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the report is very upfront about its limitations. This is just a snapshot of what's happening right now with AI usage in universities. It's not the whole picture.
Right. It's based on early adopters of Claude. And it doesn't capture everything that's happening with other AI tools.
Exactly. But even with those limitations, the study raises some really important questions that we all need to be thinking about.
Like, how do we make sure students are still developing those core cognitive skills if AI is there to do the higher level thinking for them?
Right. And how do we assess learning in a world where AI can generate really sophisticated work? What even counts as cheating anymore?
And what does meaningful learning even look like in this new landscape?
Exactly. These are big questions that we need to grapple with. Not just educators, but policymakers, students, everyone.
Because this is just the beginning, right? AI is only going to become more integrated into education.
Absolutely. So we need to be thinking about these issues now.
And it sounds like Anthropic is taking this seriously too. The report mentions that they're partnering with universities and experimenting with different approaches to AI in education.
Right. They're trying to figure out how AI can be used to actually enhance learning, not just provide quick answers or generate content.
Like their learning mode for Claude, that's supposed to be more about a Socratic approach to learning.
Exactly. Helping students develop deeper understanding, not just find quick solutions.
So to sum it all up for you, our listeners, here are the key takeaways from this deep dive into the Anthropic Education Report. STEM students, especially those in computer science, are at the forefront of AI adoption in universities. There are diverse ways that students are interacting with AI, from direct problem solving to collaborative content creation. AI is being used more for higher order cognitive tasks, which raises some concerns about the development of foundational skills. And finally, AI usage varies across different academic subjects, which suggests that we need tailored approaches to AI integration. So we've established who's leading the charge in using AI in education. Now we've dug into how they're actually interacting with AI according to this report.
It's a fascinating glimpse into the current state of AI in education and what the future might hold.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to ponder. Given what we've learned today, what one aspect of education do you think will be most fundamentally changed by the continued integration of AI? It's a question worth thinking about. What do you think will change the most?
This has been a deep dive into the Anthropic Education Report.